The cowboy saved her from a ruthless gang and discovered they shared the same enemy. The sun was beginning to dip behind the hills, casting long shadows across the dusty plains. The wind carried the faint scent of sagebrush, and the quiet hum of cicadas filled the air. On the edge of a small western town, a lone cowboy rode slowly along a worn dirt path. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, and the leather of his boots creaked as he settled deeper into the saddle. Life for him had always been simple, ruled by the rhythm of the land and the need to stay alert. He was known in town as a man who helped those in trouble, but he rarely sought attention. Most days, he preferred the company of his horse and the open sky. He had been returning from a routine trip to the market, checking on the supplies he needed for the week. The road ahead seemed empty, and for a moment he allowed himself to relax. But there was something in the air, a subtle tension that made him instinctively grip the reins tighter. Cowboys learned early to trust their instincts, and his was telling him to stay alert. Somewhere not far ahead, trouble was waiting. Meanwhile, a young woman was traveling alone along the same path. She had been walking for hours, her bag slung over her shoulder, and a small map clutched in her hand. Her eyes scanned the horizon constantly, not just for the route but for any signs of danger. She had grown up learning to fend for herself. Life had not been easy, and she had developed a sharp awareness that kept her safe in uncertain situations. She had been sent on a mission, though she preferred to keep it to herself. Her family had been wronged by a powerful man who manipulated people to serve his interests. The injustice had left a mark on her heart, and she felt compelled to act. Traveling alone was risky, but she believed she had no choice. Every step she took was deliberate, cautious, and measured. She had learned that survival often depended on timing and observation. The path ahead twisted slightly between the hills, and she felt a growing sense of unease. A faint dust cloud appeared in the distance, moving against the wind. At first, she thought it might be another traveler, but then she noticed the shapes, several men on horseback, riding fast and with purpose. Her heart skipped a beat. The reputation of the gang that roamed these lands was well known. They were ruthless, feared for their quick temper and skill in robbery. Many who had encountered them had not walked away unscathed. She tightened her grip on the strap of her bag and tried to calculate her next move. Running would be risky, but standing still meant certain danger. As the gang approached, one of them called out, a sneer in his voice, demanding her to stop and hand over her belongings. Fear and determination mingled in her chest. She had faced hardship before, but the raw threat of violence made her pulse race. She quickly assessed her surroundings, hoping for any advantage, a hidden path, a rocky outcrop, or even a distraction. At that precise moment, the cowboy noticed the commotion from a distance. He had seen the dust clouds earlier and sensed the urgency of the situation. Riders moving with that kind of intent usually meant trouble. He tightened his grip on the reins and spurred his horse forward, moving faster across the uneven ground. The wind whipped against his face, and his mind focused on a single purpose: reach her before the gang did. The gang rode closer, their expressions cruel and confident. They underestimated her, assuming she would panic or surrender. But she had a spark of defiance, a strength that refused to bow down to fear. She raised her voice, trying to buy time, warning them to stay back, even though she knew words might not stop their aggression. Her eyes scanned the ground for anything she could use, a loose branch, a rock, even the terrain itself, to gain a slight advantage. Just as the gang was closing in, a sharp whistle cut through the air. The leader of the gang froze for a split second, eyes narrowing toward the approaching figure. The cowboy appeared over a rise, riding fast, and with a determined presence that seemed to command the landscape itself. The gang hesitated, uncertain of this new threat. He didn't waste a moment. He urged his horse forward with skillful precision, positioning himself between the woman and the gang. In a matter of moments, the situation escalated into a tense standoff. The cowboy dismounted with agility, his boots hitting the ground firmly. His hand hovered near the lasso on his belt, his gaze steady and unwavering. The gang exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to proceed against someone so composed. The woman, though shaken, felt a surge of relief. Someone had arrived to protect her, and this stranger carried with him a quiet authority that demanded respect. The cowboy spoke in a calm yet firm voice, warning the gang to leave. His tone carried a weight that made them reconsider their plan. The woman watched, fascinated, as the cowboy used not just force but strategy. He knew how to use the environment to his advantage, how to anticipate their moves. Rocks, uneven ground, and the cover of the hills became part of his silent strategy. The gang, realizing they were not dealing with an ordinary traveler, hesitated. With careful movements, the cowboy managed to create enough space for the woman to move toward safety. He guided her behind a large rock formation, shielding her from view. The gang, frustrated and angered by their inability to intimidate or capture her, began to retreat slightly. But the cowboy was not about to let them escape easily. He signaled with subtle gestures, positioning himself strategically to block their path if they tried to regroup. The woman felt a mix of awe and gratitude. She had faced many challenges in her life, but rarely had she encountered someone with such calm strength in the midst of danger. She realized that survival often depended not just on courage, but on timing and skill, and this cowboy had both in abundance. She nodded in silent acknowledgement, understanding that he had risked himself to ensure her safety. As the gang finally decided to pull back, the cowboy remained alert, his eyes scanning the horizon for any further threats. The wind carried the sound of their retreating horses, and the tension slowly began to ease. The woman took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline slowly leaving her system. She had been saved, but she also knew that the journey was far from over. There were still dangers ahead, and she would need to rely on both her own instincts and the unexpected ally she had found. The cowboy approached her cautiously, offering a hand and a reassuring smile. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice steady but kind. She nodded, too overwhelmed to speak at first, then managed a faint smile. He guided her to a safer path, keeping an eye on the distance to ensure the gang did not return. As they walked together, the woman began to notice small details about the cowboy. The careful way he moved, the keen awareness in his eyes, the quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from him. It was clear he had faced danger before. She wondered what stories lay behind his calm exterior. He, in turn, observed her with a mixture of curiosity and caution, sensing that she was not just a helpless traveler but someone with purpose and determination. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Shadows stretched long across the plains, and the air grew cooler. The cowboy and the woman continued along the path, a silent understanding growing between them. Each step brought them closer, not just to safety, but to a connection forged in the heat of danger. They had met under extraordinary circumstances, and though neither could fully comprehend it yet, their paths were now intertwined. By the time they reached a small clearing where they could rest, the tension had eased, replaced by a cautious sense of trust. The cowboy offered her some water, and they shared a simple meal from the supplies he carried. They spoke little, allowing the silence to reinforce a quiet bond. Both understood that survival was not just about avoiding danger, but about learning to trust someone else in a world where threats lurked everywhere. The night began to settle over the plains, stars slowly appearing in the deepening sky. The sounds of the wilderness, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves in the wind, reminded them of the vastness of the land and the solitude it could bring. Yet, amidst the quiet and the danger, a sense of hope lingered. The cowboy had appeared when she needed help most, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of reassurance that she would not have to face the coming challenges alone. The first part of their story ended with the two of them sitting by a small fire, the night air crisp and filled with the promise of more trials ahead. They had survived the initial danger, but both knew that this was only the beginning. The cowboy and the woman, strangers just hours before, now shared a bond forged in the crucible of fear and courage, a bond that would shape the journey to come. The night had settled over the plains, but the fire crackled brightly, casting warm light over the cowboy and the woman. The darkness around them was deep, yet there was comfort in the small circle of safety they had created. The woman sipped the water the cowboy had offered, her hands trembling slightly, though not entirely from fear. It was the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, mingled with the uncertainty of the next steps. The cowboy watched her carefully, noting her cautious movements and alert eyes. He had faced many dangerous situations in his life, but there was something different about this encounter. He had seen fear before, but he also recognized determination behind her gaze, a fire that refused to be extinguished even in the face of danger. For a moment he allowed himself a thought he rarely entertained. Perhaps she was not just a traveler in trouble, but someone with purpose, someone who would not be easily broken. "You handled yourself well back there," he said quietly, breaking the silence. "Most people freeze or run, but you didn't panic." She looked up, surprised. There was no judgment in his tone, only observation, and that calmed her slightly. I've had to learn," she admitted softly. "Life doesn't wait for you to get ready." He nodded, understanding more than she realized. Life on the frontier had a way of teaching lessons harshly and quickly. "I can tell," he said simply. He paused for a moment, then asked, "Why were they after you? You weren't carrying anything valuable, were you?" Her eyes flicked to the fire as if seeing it for the first time. She hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. "It's not about what I had," she said finally. "It's about who I'm after. That gang, they work for someone powerful, someone who wants to stop me." The cowboy's interest was piqued. He leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. "Someone powerful, huh? That sounds familiar." He didn't reveal much, but a shadow of memory crossed his face. He had encountered men like that before, men who thought fear could control everything. He had faced them, lost to them in the past, and carried the scars, both visible and hidden. "What do you mean?" she asked, sensing the change in his demeanor. He looked into the fire, thinking carefully. "There are people who hide behind others, who send gangs to do their dirty work. I've dealt with them. I've lost people I cared about because of them. I didn't think I'd cross paths with someone else fighting the same kind of enemy." Her heart skipped a beat. She had expected help, but she hadn't expected recognition, a shared understanding. She had felt alone in her mission, believing that few would stand against the powerful man who had caused so much pain. Now here was someone who understood, someone who had a history of confronting the same type of threat. "I'm looking for him," she said quietly, almost to herself. "He ruined my father's life. I can't let him continue hurting people." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "I know that kind of pain," he said. "I lost someone because of a man like him, and I swore I wouldn't let him, or anyone like him, hurt anyone else if I could stop it." His voice was steady, but there was a weight behind it, a truth born from experience. They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the night sky, and for the first time since their encounter, a sense of calm washed over them. Despite the danger, despite the unknowns ahead, there was reassurance in knowing they were not alone in their fight. The woman finally spoke, breaking the quiet. "I've been careful," she said. "I've traveled alone for weeks, avoiding people who might betray me or alert him. I didn't expect someone like you to show up." The cowboy gave a small smile, the kind that rarely reached his eyes. "I've learned to trust my instincts. When danger is near, you follow it, even if it leads to someone else's path. Seems like our paths were meant to cross." A flicker of warmth passed between them, a fragile bond forming in the midst of uncertainty. Trust was not given easily in their world. It was earned through action and experience. And in the brief time they had shared, each had seen enough to recognize the other's courage and skill. "Do you know him well?" the woman asked cautiously. "The man we're both after." The cowboy's expression darkened. "I know enough," he admitted. "He's clever, manipulative, and dangerous. He doesn't get his hands dirty directly, but he surrounds himself with people who will do it for him. That gang back there, they're just a part of his network." Her eyes widened slightly. "Exactly. That's why I've had to be careful. He's protected by people like them. He makes sure anyone who tries to challenge him ends up in trouble, or worse." He nodded, a grim understanding passing between them. "We'll need a plan. If we're going after him, we can't rush in blindly. That gang, they'll be back, and they won't be alone." She studied him, noting the calm authority in his voice. It was reassuring. "I know the area better than anyone," she said. "I've been tracking his movements for weeks. I've learned his routines, the people he trusts, and the places he uses to hide his tracks. But I've never had anyone to help me before. I've always done this alone." "That changes now," he said firmly. "You won't be alone anymore." For the first time since she began this journey, she felt a glimmer of hope. The loneliness and constant fear that had accompanied her were eased slightly by the presence of someone who not only understood the danger, but had the skill and courage to face it. Together, they had a better chance of confronting the challenges ahead. They spoke late into the night, sharing stories and experiences, finding common ground in their struggles. She learned that he had grown up on the plains, learning to survive by his wits and his courage. He had faced outlaws, wild animals, and the harsh realities of frontier life. Every experience had shaped him into someone capable of handling threats with intelligence and precision. In turn, he listened as she recounted the injustice that had brought her on this journey. The loss of her father's peace, the constant fear, and the burden of responsibility weighed heavily on her, but she carried it with strength and determination. He recognized the same fire he had seen in many who refused to be broken by adversity. By the time the fire burned low, they had formed an unspoken agreement. They would face the danger together. It was not yet a full trust, but a recognition of necessity and shared purpose. The woman knew she could rely on his skills and instincts, while the cowboy understood that she was capable, resourceful, and determined. As the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon, the woman felt a renewed sense of determination. The journey ahead would not be easy, and the enemy they sought was cunning and ruthless. But now she was not alone. She had someone who understood, someone who could watch her back and face danger with her. The cowboy, too, felt a renewed sense of purpose. For years he had faced threats and injustice, often alone. But now he had an ally who shared not just his sense of justice, but also his willingness to fight for what was right. The thought gave him a rare moment of optimism. They packed their belongings, ensuring that nothing was left behind that could be traced. Every movement was deliberate, every decision calculated. They moved quietly, understanding that the threat of the gang remained, that danger could appear at any moment. Each step they took was a small act of courage, a preparation for the challenges yet to come. As they continued along the path, the woman felt a sense of cautious excitement. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel entirely vulnerable. The cowboy walked beside her, silent and watchful, a steady presence in a world that had often felt unpredictable and threatening. They crossed the plains in the early morning light, the rising sun painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. Birds sang in the trees, and the wind carried the scent of fresh grass and earth. It was a moment of calm before the storm, a reminder that even in a world filled with danger, there were moments of beauty and peace to be found. During a brief rest by a small stream, the woman studied the cowboy carefully. She noticed the way he observed the surroundings, always alert, always thinking ahead. She realized that his skill was not just in physical strength or courage, but in his intelligence and ability to anticipate problems. She began to understand that together, they could be a formidable team. He, in turn, observed her with growing admiration. Her determination, her sharp mind, and her unwavering focus impressed him. She was not just a companion, she was a partner who could think, act, and survive. The realization strengthened his resolve to protect her, to work alongside her, and to face whatever challenges lay ahead. By midday, they had covered a significant distance. The threat of the gang remained, but the bond between them had grown. They shared glances of understanding, small gestures that conveyed trust and reliance. The journey ahead was still dangerous, but they faced it together, and that made all the difference. For the first time, both felt a sense of hope and determination. The enemy they sought was powerful, but together they were stronger. Their paths had crossed by chance, but now, purpose and shared goals bound them. They would face the challenges ahead side by side, their courage and trust a shield against the dangers of the world around them. The sun was high in the sky, casting a warm glow across the rolling plains. The cowboy and the woman had traveled far since the night they first met, their steps carefully calculated, and their eyes always scanning for threats. The silence between them was comfortable now, no longer awkward. Each had grown to respect the other's skills and judgment. Trust was still new, fragile, but it had started to solidify into something stronger, an unspoken understanding that they were not just traveling together, but fighting together. They reached the edge of a small canyon, a natural barrier that would provide cover from anyone following them. The cowboy dismounted, his boots hitting the dusty ground with a soft thud. "This spot will work," he said quietly, looking toward the horizon. "It gives us a view of the surrounding area, and we can plan our next move without being seen." The woman nodded, her eyes bright with focus. "Good. We need a plan that will allow us to confront the gang and find the man behind them. We can't just rush in blindly." "He's clever, and he always has someone watching his back." The cowboy studied her for a moment. "I agree, but we can't wait forever either. They'll be regrouping, and the longer we wait, the stronger they get." He ran a hand over his hat, adjusting it before settling into the task at hand. We need to know their routines, where they usually camp, and the paths they take. If we can anticipate their movements, we can control the outcome instead of reacting to it. She pulled out the small map she had been keeping hidden, spreading it on a flat rock. I've been tracking him for weeks, she said. I know his favorite hideouts, the trails his men use, and even the times he usually moves. But I can't take him down alone. I've always had to be careful because one wrong step could put me directly in danger. The cowboy leaned over the map, tracing a finger along the routes she had marked. These paths make sense, he said, nodding slowly. We can set up positions here and here. We'll need to split attention, watch the trails, and make sure he doesn't slip away. He paused, looking at her with a steady gaze. We'll do this together. I cover one side, you cover the other. We move in sync. If we stay alert, we'll have the advantage. She felt a rush of gratitude and a quiet sense of relief. For the first time, she felt she was not completely alone in this fight. The cowboy's calm confidence balanced her own determination. Together, they formed a strategy based not only on knowledge and skill, but on trust, the rarest kind of asset in a world filled with betrayal. The day passed as they prepared. They gathered supplies, checking ropes, food, water, and ammunition. Every detail was considered, every possible scenario discussed. They practiced movements, signaling to each other with small gestures, ensuring that communication would remain silent if needed. The sun began to lower in the sky, and shadows stretched long across the canyon floor. It was almost time to move. As they approached the first path marked on her map, tension tightened around them like a coiled spring. The cowboy dismounted, examining the ground for signs of the gang's recent passage, hoofprints, disturbed dirt, broken twigs. He gestured silently to the woman to move forward carefully, her steps precise and quiet. Both knew that any sound could alert the enemy. Suddenly, movement caught her eye. A shadow flickered along a distant ridge. Her pulse quickened. "They're here," she whispered. The cowboy nodded, his jaw tight. "Stay calm. We've expected this. Just follow the plan." The gang appeared over the ridge, riding fast and confident. They were unaware of the positions that had been set, unaware that the people they thought were easy targets were ready and alert. The cowboy signaled, and the woman moved into position. They had chosen a route that would force the gang to come directly into view, giving them the advantage of surprise and higher ground. The first encounter was brief but intense. The gang, caught off guard by their presence, hesitated. The cowboy shouted a warning, and the ground between them erupted into dust as horses stamped and hooves pounded. He moved with skill, blocking one rider from reaching the woman, while she held her ground, her sharp eye and steady aim forcing another to falter. The dust and chaos gave them cover, allowing both to reposition and maintain control. After the initial clash, they retreated to the cover of the canyon, breathing heavily but remaining alert. "They're more organized than I expected," the woman said, wiping sweat from her brow. "But they're predictable. They rely on intimidation and numbers, not skill." The cowboy nodded, scanning the horizon. "Exactly. They're confident because no one has ever challenged them successfully, but we can change that. We just need to stay patient and strike when they least expect it." Hours passed as they waited for the gang to make another move. The sun dipped low, painting the canyon in warm oranges and deep shadows. They discussed tactics quietly, considering every possibility. "We need to anticipate reinforcements," the cowboy said. "If they have more riders waiting nearby, we can't allow ourselves to be trapped. We'll need escape routes ready just in case." She studied him carefully, impressed by his foresight. "I've never worked with anyone like you," she admitted. "You think of everything, every possible outcome. It makes me feel safer." He gave a small, almost reluctant smile. "That's the idea. Out here, safety is a rare thing. We plan, we prepare, and we hope we can survive. But it's better than walking blind into danger." As darkness fell, they made their move. The cowboy led the way, using the terrain to hide their approach. The woman followed, her senses heightened, ready for any sudden movement. They approached the gang's temporary camp, a small clearing with tents and supplies scattered around. The fire in the center flickered, casting shadows that danced across the surrounding rocks. The cowboy signaled for her to stay low. "We need to observe first," he whispered. "Count their numbers, notice their routines. Don't make a sound. The less they see of us, the better." From their hidden position, they watched the gang carefully. They noted how the men moved, who was in charge, and how the leader, unknown to them at first, directed the others. The woman recognized the style of control immediately. It was the same pattern her enemy used, the same manipulation she had been tracking for weeks. She glanced at the cowboy, realizing that their enemy's power extended beyond just brute force. It was intelligence, strategy, and fear combined. "This is him," she whispered, pointing to the man directing the gang. "That's the one I've been looking for." The cowboy studied the man for a moment, recognition flashing across his face. "I thought so. He's clever and dangerous, but he underestimates people like us. He doesn't think someone will plan, wait, and strike with purpose." They spent the next few hours observing, noting weaknesses in the gang's formation and patterns in the leader's behavior. The woman's knowledge combined with the cowboy's experience made their assessment precise and valuable. They discussed each step, predicting the gang's reactions and deciding when and how to strike. As midnight approached, they moved into position. The cowboy took the higher ground, giving him a clear view of the clearing and any approaches. The woman positioned herself near a narrow path, ensuring that the enemy could not escape without detection. Their hearts raced, not from fear, but from anticipation and the tension of the coming confrontation. The first strike was subtle. A small disturbance, a flicker of movement in the shadows, drew the attention of a few gang members. They turned, looking for the source, giving the cowboy and the woman an advantage. The cowboy acted quickly, cutting off one escape route and forcing the gang into a tighter area. The woman's sharp eyes and precise actions prevented anyone from leaving unseen. The gang reacted with anger and confusion. They had never faced opponents who planned so meticulously, opponents who moved with skill, caution, and patience. The cowboy and the woman pressed their advantage, using the terrain, the darkness, and their knowledge to control the flow of the confrontation. It was not just a fight of strength, but of intelligence. Every move counted, every decision mattered. The cowboy used his experience to anticipate attacks, while the woman's knowledge of their leader's habits allowed them to predict his decisions. Together, they were a force neither the gang nor their master had anticipated. By the early hours of the morning, the gang was disoriented, weakened, and retreating. The cowboy and the woman remained vigilant, ensuring no one slipped away. They had gained the upper hand, but the final confrontation with the leader, the true enemy, still lay ahead. Exhausted but determined, they retreated to a safe location nearby. "We've done well," the woman said quietly, "but the man we're after, he's still out there. We can't let him slip away now." The cowboy nodded. "I know. But we've forced him to make mistakes, and that gives us an opening. Tomorrow we'll be ready for him." They rested briefly, tending to minor injuries and gathering strength for the next phase. They knew the danger was far from over, but their teamwork had proven effective. They had confronted the gang, observed their behavior, and gained critical intelligence. The first major step in their plan was complete. As dawn approached, the cowboy and the woman looked out over the plains, the sky a soft pink and gold. They shared a quiet moment, reflecting on what had transpired. The danger had tested them, strengthened their partnership, and reinforced the importance of trust and strategy. Their journey was far from over. The true enemy still awaited, cunning and ruthless. But now they faced him not as two separate individuals, but as a team. The bond forged in action, trust, and shared purpose would guide them through the challenges ahead, and neither would back down. The morning sun rose over the plains, casting a golden light on the rugged terrain. The cowboy and the woman had spent the night planning, studying every detail of the enemy's movements. The events of the previous day had strengthened their bond, proving that together they could face dangers that would have been impossible alone. Yet the final confrontation loomed ahead, a meeting with the man who had caused them both so much pain, the one whose influence had created fear and destruction for so long. They moved carefully through the early light, their footsteps silent against the dry earth. Every sound was scrutinized, every shadow considered. The cowboy led the way, his senses alert to the slightest movement. The woman followed close behind, carrying the knowledge of their enemy's habits and hideouts like a map etched in her mind. Their plan depended on precision, timing, and coordination. There was no room for mistakes. As they neared the small settlement where the enemy had been reported, the tension in the air grew thick. The town itself was quiet, almost unnaturally so, as if everyone had been warned to keep their distance. The cowboy signaled for them to stop behind a rocky outcrop. From this vantage point, they could see the main building where the enemy was believed to be, guarded by several men who had once been part of the Ruthless gang. The woman whispered, "I can see the leader. He's there in the courtyard speaking with his men. They don't suspect anyone is near." Her voice was calm but carried the weight of urgency. She traced the path they would take, noting exits, cover points, and potential hazards. The cowboy nodded. "Good, we'll split their attention. You take the left side, I'll take the right. We need to make sure he can't escape and that his men can't flank us. Remember, this is about precision. Quick moves, calculated risks. We don't have to overpower them with numbers. We'll do it with skill and timing." She looked at him, admiration in her eyes. "I've never had anyone fight alongside me like this, someone I can trust completely." He gave a small, almost shy smile. "I've never met anyone who could handle themselves like you do. Together, we're stronger than they think." Taking a deep breath, they moved into position. The cowboy's horse had been left hidden at a safe distance, ready for a quick escape or pursuit if needed. The woman advanced carefully, using the rocks and shadows to stay concealed. Their approach was silent, methodical, and deliberate. The first part of the plan was to create a distraction. The cowboy kicked up a small dust cloud near one of the outer guards. Startled, the guard drew his weapon, shouting to alert the others. The enemy's men rushed toward the noise, leaving the courtyard slightly less defended. The woman seized the moment, slipping into the courtyard with agility. She moved behind the remaining guards, keeping low and silent. The enemy himself had not yet noticed their presence. She observed him, noting his habits, his arrogance, the careless confidence that had always made him vulnerable. The cowboy moved simultaneously from the other side, his presence sudden and commanding. The guards on his side froze, unsure of how to respond to a man who seemed to anticipate every move before it happened. His experience, skill, and calm authority gave him the upper hand immediately. The courtyard erupted into a flurry of action, but it was controlled chaos. The cowboy and the woman moved in sync, covering each other, communicating with small gestures and sharp glances. Every step was calculated, every move designed to neutralize the threat without unnecessary risk. They had learned to trust each other implicitly, and that trust now became their most powerful weapon. The enemy realized too late that he was no longer in control. His guards were being outmaneuvered, and the two intruders were far more capable than he had anticipated. Panic flickered across his face, though he tried to maintain a mask of authority. The cowboy stepped forward, blocking any attempt at escape, while the woman carefully confronted him from another angle. "You underestimated us," the cowboy said, his voice calm but firm. "That was your first mistake." The enemy's eyes narrowed, anger and fear mingling in a dangerous combination. Who are you?" he demanded. "Someone who won't let you hurt anyone else," the woman replied, her voice steady, her eyes unwavering. She remembered all the pain he had caused, the injustice that had shadowed her life, but she did not let anger cloud her judgment. Precision and focus were far more powerful than reckless rage. The confrontation reached its peak when the enemy attempted to flee, hoping to use a hidden passage. The cowboy anticipated this, cutting him off with swift, silent steps. The woman intercepted his last-ditch attempt to attack her, her movements precise and controlled. Together they corralled him, leaving him with no options. The enemy's arrogance faltered completely. "You don't understand what you're up against," he spat, but there was a note of desperation in his voice now. "I understand enough," the cowboy replied. "And it's over. Your control ends here." The women and the cowboy ensured that none of the enemy's men could interfere. Some were captured, some fled in fear, but all were disarmed or neutralized. It was not about punishment, but about justice. They had acted with skill, precision, and calm, ensuring no unnecessary harm came to innocents while bringing the true threat under control. As the adrenaline faded and the dust settled, the woman and the cowboy surveyed the courtyard. The enemy sat cornered, defeated but alive. The sense of relief that came over them was tempered by the knowledge that justice was only beginning. They had faced the danger, neutralized the immediate threat, and ensured that the man could no longer manipulate or terrorize others. The woman took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. For weeks, she had carried fear, anger, and uncertainty. Now she felt a sense of closure, not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered at his hands. She turned to the cowboy, gratitude and respect shining in her eyes. "We did it," she said quietly. "We actually did it." The cowboy gave a small nod. Yes, but it wasn't just about taking him down. It's about making sure people know that they can't hide behind fear forever. There's always a way to stand up, to fight back, to survive. They secured the enemy and his remaining men for the authorities who had been alerted to their location. The woman stayed close, ensuring that justice would be carried out properly, while the cowboy maintained a watchful eye, ready for any final attempts to escape or cause harm. As the sun climbed higher, they finally allowed themselves a moment of respite. Sitting on a low rock, they looked out over the plains, the land stretching endlessly before them. The battle had been won, but the journey had changed them both. They had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty together, and in doing so had discovered strengths they did not know they possessed. The woman turned to the cowboy. "I never imagined I'd find someone who understands, someone I can trust like this. I always thought I had to do everything alone." He gave her a firm, reassuring look. "You're strong, capable, and determined, but even the strongest need allies. Sometimes the right person appears at the right time, and you realize you don't have to carry everything by yourself." A quiet understanding passed between them. They had begun as strangers, thrown together by circumstance, but now they were partners in every sense of the word. The dangers they had faced had forged a bond of respect, trust, and shared purpose. The woman felt a sense of hope she had not experienced in a long time. The enemy who had caused so much pain was no longer free to manipulate, control, or harm others. She had faced her fears, confronted the past, and found an unexpected ally in the cowboy. Together they had not only survived, they had prevailed. As they prepared to leave the settlement, the cowboy offered a hand, helping her mount her horse. They rode side by side, the wind carrying a sense of freedom and possibility. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but now they faced it together, with courage, trust, and the knowledge that they could overcome anything when united. The plains stretched endlessly, golden in the sunlight, peaceful yet filled with the promise of adventure. The cowboy and the woman rode forward, leaving behind the shadows of fear, injustice, and danger. Their story was no longer just about survival. It was about courage, justice, and the unbreakable bond formed in the face of overwhelming odds. The world would continue, and threats would arise, but they had proven that even in the darkest moments, determination, skill, and trust could prevail. The cowboy and the woman had discovered not just a shared enemy, but a shared purpose, one that would guide them forward in whatever challenges awaited. As the wind rustled the grass and the horizon stretched endlessly, they rode together, side by side. They had faced the ruthless gang, exposed the true enemy, and emerged victorious. The journey had tested them, shaped them, and united them. And though the plains were vast and life uncertain, they now knew that courage, trust, and teamwork could overcome even the most formidable obstacles. The sun climbed higher, bathing them in warmth and light. The journey was not over, but the first victory had been won. Together they rode forward, ready for whatever the future might hold. They had discovered strength in each other, and that strength would guide them through all that lay ahead.